Welcome to the candidate forum for the Pennsylvania's Superior Court judicial elections. I am Deborah Gross, CEO of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. I first want to thank the Carnegie Library for hosting this event and to thank the League of Women Voters, the Pennsylvania Bar Association, the Philadelphia Bar Association, the Allegheny County Bar Association, the Committee of 70, and the League of Women Voters for co-sponsoring this program with us. PMC is a nonprofit dedicated to assuring a Pennsylvania judicial system which provides impartiality, fairness, accessibility, and respect. We have advocated for judicial reforms that promote the rule of law, access to justice, and a diverse, qualified, and independent judiciary. The primary elections are May 18th, for which you must register to vote by May 3rd, and please do vote. Judges make important decisions that impact your life. You should investigate who is running and research their qualifications. You can find more out about the judicial candidates on our website, www.pmconline.org. Additionally, we held a Supreme Court candidate forum, which is available on our website, and we will be holding a Commonwealth candidate forum on April 19th. And you can register on our website as well. A few rules before we begin. If you have any questions, put them in the Q&A, and we will hope to be able to answer them towards the end of the program. Please know that many questions have already been sent to us by registrants. Additionally, under the Pennsylvania Code of Judicial Conduct, judicial candidates cannot make pledges, promises, or commitments on specific issues or on cases that could appear before them. That's to protect the impartiality of judges and to provide us confidence that the judges will make decisions based on the facts and law before them. Also cannot directly ask for campaign contributions. They have campaign committees. For example, and there may be monies coming from PACs, but the candidates are not aware of the don't have any relationship with any of these PACs. I would now like to introduce our moderator for the night, Marcel Pratt. I thank you so very much for doing this. Marcel is a partner at Ballard Spahr and in charge of the Philadelphia office. He is the immediate past city solicitor of Philadelphia, with whom I've worked when I was chancellor of the Philadelphia Bar Association. He was in charge of a 330-member law department and represented the city in many different types of litigation. Thank you, Marcel, and I very much appreciate your moderating this event.
Debbie, thanks for that kind introduction, and good evening and welcome to all of our attendees and to our panelists. I want to thank the many sponsors and hosts for making this event happen, especially in a virtual environment. It is certainly a privilege and an honor to facilitate tonight's conversation among these candidates for Superior Court. The selection of judges has always been a critical function for our society, and some might argue that it's more important today than it's ever been. And so I'm going to ask a series of questions tonight that will help our audience get to know these candidates better and hopefully to learn more about their qualifications and to get a sense of their personal values. So a few quick notes up front. The questions that I'm going to ask come from a variety of sources, including our sponsors and registered guests. Each candidate will be asked the same question, and we'll have precisely 2 minutes to provide an answer. The order in which the candidates answer the questions will change. And if members of the audience have questions, please place them in the Q&A box. And if we have time, we will get to them. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right in. And the first question will be to the candidates. Will you please introduce yourself and tell us why you want to be a judge on the Superior Court? And we're going to start in alphabetical order with Ms. Beck.
Thank you, and good evening. My name is Jill Beck, and I am running for Pennsylvania Superior Court. The Superior Court is the Court of Appeals for civil, criminal, family, juvenile, and orphans court matters. I'm uniquely qualified to serve as a judge of the Superior Court because I've practiced in all these areas and I have experience on both sides of the Superior Court bench. I've largely dedicated my career as a litigator to public service, representing abused and neglected children, victims of domestic violence, protecting our elections and our vote, helping people experiencing housing insecurity, and working to help people without money get the same rights and protections as people who do. I've done this in both the civil and criminal realm, at the trial level, and in appellate courts across the country. All told, I've tried approximately 1,400 cases in my career in courts under the Superior Court's jurisdiction. I've also practiced in the Superior Court itself, filing appeals, defending appeals, and orally arguing before that court. And I have extensive experience on the other side of the bench, spending 10 years in the Superior and Supreme Court chambers of the Honorable Christine Donahue, where I drafted more than 500 decisions of the very kind I will get to decide when elected to the Superior Court. Who you elect as a judge matters. A Superior Court judge should have a Superior Court experience, be knowledgeable in all areas of the law upon which she'll be deciding cases. These cases are unquestionably important as they are deciding a person's right to freedom, their right to parent their children, to their health, their wealth, their safety, to their land, to their businesses, to their inheritance. The Superior Court interprets the laws of our Commonwealth and our Constitution. These cases don't just impact the litigants. They impact you, me, and everyone because our laws apply to everyone. I've been highly recommended by the Allegheny County Bar Association to be a Superior Court judge, and the Pennsylvania Bar Association has also recommended me for the job. I know this court, I know the law, and I'm passionate about the work. Many thanks to Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, the Carnegie Library, League of Women Voters, the Committee of 70, and the Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and Allegheny County Bar Associations for holding this event. And thanks to you, Marcel, for serving as moderator. I look forward to answering all the questions.
Next, Judge Lane, introduce yourself and tell us why you want to be a judge on the Superior Court.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Judge Timika Lane, and I was elected to the Court of Common Pleas in 2013. And I am the only candidate who is running for Superior Court who is actually a judge with experience on both sides of the aisle. And boy, I can't tell you how important that is. Growing up, my grandmother always had this saying that it wasn't about me, it wasn't about you. And she's right, it's always about being of service to others. And that's how I've lived my life, one of public service. And the Superior Court, as you've already heard, is an error-correcting court and the final stop for most people in Pennsylvania. It handles the appeals from the Court of Common Pleas, the court in which I currently sit on. Who best can do this, who can review the record, than a judge who does it day in and day out, like myself? I've been a law clerk drafting opinions for my boss. I've been a child advocate in court fighting on behalf of abused and neglected children. I've been a public defender trying complex criminal matters for juveniles and adults. I've tried thousands of cases from start to finish. I've been a supervisor there. I also done civil arbitrations where I sit in panels of 3 and decided civil matters. I worked in the Pennsylvania Senate drafting legislation, the very legislation that are laws and which are interpreted by the courts. I have such a unique background that I bring to the court in addition to being a judge. When I sit on that bench, when I zip up my black robe and I preside over these matters, that's not a duty I take lightly. And being a judge, making those hard decisions, that matters day in and day out. I sit in the criminal division. I am the only judge who hears human trafficking cases, but I do domestic violence, I do family violence, sexual assault cases, I do serious felony cases before juries and before me. I make the decisions. And I've done that as a trial attorney as well as a judge. And that matters. With that responsibility, okay, I'm gonna wrap it up. But I just wanna say that also on the bench, I've been very busy in reentry programs. I'm busy in the community. I was co-chair of Advancing Civics Education, still teaching civics. I was a former public school teacher. I have not lost that love of teaching. And I just humbly will say, thank you so much for putting this together so people can actually hear the candidates and decide who they want to sit on the bench. But we need someone with real life experiences. I was born of humble means. I'm a single mom, first generation college, first generation law school. I was a teacher still working retail. I understand life. I'm a cancer survivor and a fighter. And we need someone, if that's the final stop for people in Pennsylvania, who understand these issues. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Neft, same question.
Thank you, Marcel, and thank you to all of the institutions that have provided the service tonight to put this on. My name is Bryan Neft, and I am running for judge of the Pennsylvania Superior Court. I am from Allegheny County. The Allegheny County Bar Association has rated me highly recommended for the position of Superior Court judge, and the Pennsylvania Bar Association has also recommended me. And in their recommendation of me, they said, the candidate's writing is skillful and displays a formidable knowledge of trial-related issues. He is hardworking, has a reputation for excellent character and integrity, and possesses a calm temperament. And those are the qualities that you want in a judge that's going to be on the Superior Court. I have worked for the last 30 years in practice. I clerked for a Superior Court judge for 4 years, where I worked on all of the types of cases that go before the Superior Court. And I drafted hundreds of decisions for the judge that I worked for in all of those areas. And in my private practice, which is basically a civil litigation practice, I have practiced before all of the appellate courts, the Pennsylvania Superior Court, its sister court, the Commonwealth Court, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And I practiced in 30 different counties across the Commonwealth. And I understand the diversity of all of the citizenry across the Commonwealth, but I understand that everybody is entitled to the same thing when they come to court, which is a fair and full opportunity to be heard and an equal opportunity to have their case presented. And that's what I bring to the table. And I could speak for a long time about my qualifications and credentials. I've spent a lot of time in my private practice working hard to feed my family. But I've spent a lot of time outside of my private practice in my professional career to advance the judiciary, to advance the profession of law, and to improve all of those. And I just want to tell you about some of those things. I've been a leader in the Allegheny County Bar Association for many years and served as its president in 2018 and 2019. And while I've been working for the Bar Association, I've championed issues for women, for people of color, and for the LGBTQ community. I've worked to raise millions of dollars for hunger relief in Allegheny County, and I sat on the gender bias subcommittee where we fielded complaints from individuals that believe they suffered gender bias in our profession. And by the appointment of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, I sat on the Pennsylvania IOLTA board and chaired that organization during my last year. And I'm proud of the work that we did to maximize the number of people that could get legal services who couldn't otherwise afford it. I'm committed to access to justice and making sure that people get the representation they need in court. I'm ready to take this one step further and to be a judge on the Superior Court. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you. And Ms. Sullivan, the same question.
Thank you very much. Thank you, PMC, for hosting this great forum. And also thank you, Marcel, for being our moderator for this venue. I believe why I want to be a judge is because in my 21 years of practice, I have balance and I have experience. I am balanced in that I have a practice of over 12 years as a prosecutor, both in the Chester County DA's office, and I also have experience as a prosecutor and a civil litigator in the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. All of which were public service, giving back to our community, giving back to our Commonwealth. I also have over 8 years of civil litigation experience. So I would bring to the court a balance of both civil and criminal. I am very, very committed to the Superior Court, and I have unique experience in the actual Superior Court as an advocate. So when I was at the Chester County DA's office, I was in the appellate division and I drafted hundreds upon hundreds of briefs for the Superior Court and argued over a dozen, probably 24 times in front of the Superior Court. So that uniquely qualifies me because I've had the consistent experience of being before the Superior Court. I also was a child abuse prosecutor and was lucky enough and blessed enough to protect the most vulnerable citizens in our Commonwealth, the children. So I think I am uniquely qualified in that sense. But when you talk to my peers and my fellow practitioners, what is my essence is my thoughtfulness, my objectiveness, and my fairness. And I think those are all qualities that a judge needs in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I possess all of those. Thank you.
Thank you for introducing yourselves. I want you to help us to get to know you better. So I'm going to ask you to identify a specific life experience that prepared you for being a judge on the Superior Court. And with this question, we're going to start with Judge Lane.
Thank you. I think there are so many experiences that prepared me for being a judge on the Superior Court, besides the obvious that I'm already a judge on the Court of Common Pleas, and they have the same subject matters that go before the Superior Court. But I think there are numerous. It's growing up from humble beginnings. It is being a cancer survivor. It's being a single mom and struggling out here. It's knowing that I had to adjust to a new normal. So many people who interact with the judicial system also had to adjust to a new normal, whether it's an abused or neglected child, someone who has been recently divorced, someone whose liberty has been on the line, or a victim of a crime, or someone who's dealt with maybe medical malpractice or something of that nature. I think there are so many of my life experiences that uniquely qualify me for this. But I think also being a voice for the voiceless, because the Superior Court is a final stop for so many people in Pennsylvania, I think it is imperative to have a diversity of voices in that room. And I bring a unique voice. I'm trying to hurry up before Debbie flashes the card on me. I don't know how much time I have left. I couldn't see it well. But I can go on if you want to, Marcel. I can talk about this all day.
No, thanks for thanks for your answer, Judge. Next, I'm going to ask Mr. Neft to provide his answer. A specific life experience that prepared you for being a judge on the Superior Court.
So I talk about, when I go out and I talk about stump speeches, I talk about the inspiration for why I went to law school to begin with was because my mother preceded me to law school by 5 years. When I was in high school, she decided to give up her career as a teacher and become a lawyer. And, it's been a great run with my mom, which I might talk about later, but something that I've never really talked about before and gives me kind of the life experience is something else that happened that wasn't necessarily so positive in my life, but caused me, to become a lot more self-sufficient. Unfortunately in Pittsburgh, back in the early 1980s, we suffered a severe economic crisis in the steel industry. And because of it, the steel industry collapsed, but so did a lot of businesses. And it was unfortunate, but my dad, he owned a business that didn't make it at the end of the day, because many of the people in the steel industry just couldn't afford what he was selling anymore, which was sporting goods. And his business died as a result of it. And, because of that, I had to become a little bit more self-sufficient than I ever was before. So when I went off to college, I held jobs, all the time. I was a newspaper deliverer. I worked at a wonderful restaurant downtown in Center City, Philadelphia, called the Commissary, and took the subway home every night when I was done. And I, worked as a lifeguard, and I stacked books in the library. I did whatever I had to do. And I came home in the summer, and I worked all summer long for Pittsburgh National Bank as a bank teller. And during that time, I got to meet some wonderful people in one of the most diverse areas of Pittsburgh, just doing that work. But I really learned the value of hard work and doing what's necessary to make sure that I get ahead. And it's been, experience that's been very humbling in its own way, and something that I'm proud that I've, persevered through and made it as far as I have. But it has shown me the value of really hard work and doing what needs to be done to get the job done.
Ms. Sullivan, same question.
Yes, I believe besides work-wise, my experience in front of the Superior Court for 3 years, my life experience that qualifies me is my working class backgrounds. I grew up in a working class neighborhood in Philadelphia. My parents only had a high school education, but they taught me the meaning of hard work. And I always did well in school. They said, be educated and always give back to the community. And that's exactly what I've done. And when I was faced with going to college and my parents not being able to afford it, we had to look and see if I would have to do a modified program. And right before I went to school and was going to sign up to go to community college, a scholarship came through. The blessing that scholarship provided was my education. And I swore that blessing would go forward, and that I would always try to give back to my community, to give to others the same opportunity of education that I had. And I worked very hard during my undergrad, and I always got great grades, and worked as a waitress, as a teacher and a teacher's assistant in a daycare. And those things taught me to always work hard and also never take anything for granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Beck, same question.
Thank you. The best life experience I had to prepare me to be a Superior Court judge is my time in the Superior Court itself. I mean, you cannot get better on the job training than being behind the scenes and seeing exactly how the job is done. Having served as a litigator for the first part of my career, and then again, following the end of my experience on the courts, it was really surprising to me exactly how things were done on the Superior Court behind the scenes, how a decision is crafted, how it comes together, and the work that it takes to do that. The Superior Court is the busiest court in the country, deciding approximately 8,000 decisions a year. You have to have a very careful balance of efficiency, but thoroughness. And, those are skills that I acquired while working on the court. You also have to have the ability to, apply the law to the facts of the law, put it together like a puzzle, and to draft the decision in a way that everybody from the pro se litigant to the highest paid attorney in the Commonwealth can understand. And these are skills that are learned. These are skills that do not just come naturally. And so certainly for me, practicing in the Superior Court and being behind the scenes is hands down the best experience I could have to be a Superior Court judge.
Thank you for your answers. Moving on to the next question. I think a panel of this magnitude has to take a moment to reflect on the past year. 2020 was trying on so many levels. We were devastated by a pandemic. We witnessed a reckoning on issues of racial justice after the murder of George Floyd. We had a presidential election that was very divisive, to put it mildly, where this state was a focal point. And we also started this year witnessing a disgraceful attack on our nation's capital. So the question for each of the candidates is, what lessons have you personally learned from the past year? And we're going to start with Mr. Neft.
Marcel, this has been a really interesting year. I mean, from my own experience, it was just very uprooted. I think that at least one of the lessons that I learned was to get to spend more time with my family, since I got to work from home as opposed to being at the office a lot and doing things in that regard. I think we also found other ways of working, such as being online, which I think is going to impact the practice of law going forward, and in fact, the judiciary, because in many ways, although it may not be the best way to get across to the court one way or the other, there are people that might really benefit from being able to do a video hookup with a court as opposed to trying to get there in person, because they may not have the resources to get there in person. In terms of, what lessons have we learned that might apply to the judiciary going forward? I think the most important lesson is that the rule of law prevails over everything. So that, the public knows that judges operate under the rule of law, that they look at the law, they look at the statutes, they look at the precedents that have been written, and that's really the focus of what the court does. And I think that lesson has to be reiterated a lot, because the public has to have a lot of faith in the judiciary, that it's working the way that it should be, independent from all of the other politics that may be taking place, whether in the legislatures or in the executive branches.
Thank you. Ms. Sullivan, the same question.
Well, certainly the pandemic and the shutdown had affected everybody's job, whether you were blessed enough to keep your job or lose your job. And I think what prevailed was a sense that everybody was out of control, no matter what walk of life you were from, no matter how much money you had or didn't have, everything was out of control. And I think the most important thing I learned was refocusing my life and saying, what is within my control? How can I help? So many people lost their jobs. So many people became homeless. And in constructing what I could do, what was in my control to help, I reached out to my church, which feeds the homeless normally. But because many of those individuals who volunteered were older people, they needed younger people to go out and actually, prepare meals and give those meals to the homeless shelter and help serve them. So that was one way that I could give back and feel like I had some control and I could help our community. So I did that during the pandemic. The other piece was our families weren't normal. Our children were in virtual school, and they started to get depressed and I think the word was used, the new normal. So what we decided to do as a family was to start fostering dogs to help them find forever homes with other people. And I think that helped me and my family both have a family activity, learn life skills, and also help others in the community. So I think those two things, it was being able to figure out what we could control and what we could help going forward. Thank you.
Ms. Beck, same question.
Thank you. Certainly the first lesson and an important lesson I learned was time management in a very big way. I was, through the spring, I was teaching my kindergartner and second grader school during the day, and then being a lawyer at night, and mixing things in as I could in between, doing lesson plans at 2 in the morning and trying to figure out what the next day would bring day in and day out. I knew, though, no matter how much I was struggling, and certainly, as Megan was saying, everyone was struggling in some way, I knew how fortunate I was to be struggling in the way I was. We had food, we had a home, and we had our family. Another thing I would say I learned is how important community is. I think you don't realize how much your friends and neighbors and extended family and maybe your religious counterparts and parishioners are until you have them stripped from you. And I think that the importance of community and working together and being respectful of each other and taking care of each other was something that was a big lesson for this year as well.
And Judge Lane, the same question for you.
Thank you. I think the first thing that came to mind when you asked that question was just gratitude. It's just a blessing to be here and to be healthy. I know what it's like to not be healthy and to really go through turmoil, and to be here to see another day and to see my family still here. And we've all lost people, unfortunately, to COVID this year, and it's been a rough year for everyone. And I have to echo community. I think we really kicked in and we did what's needed. Like, as soon as COVID hit, I went down in my basement and I sold over 100 masks that I donated to grants' parents. These are grandparents raising their grandchildren. I donated masks to first responders when people couldn't find PPE at that time. I kicked in with my colleagues and judges from the First Judicial District. We went out and we did share. We worked with the Salvation Army, making sure that the kids had not only having snacks, but they had projects, they had something that would just make them smile for the day. And I think that was so important. And knowing that people were hungry, I dedicated so much of my time just shopping and buying groceries for people, working with ElderNet, working with all these different groups, because I think that's when we're faced with a crisis, I think we all band together and stick together, and that's how we get through it. And again, so just to reiterate that one word, this is gratitude. Gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. It's a two-part question. Should we reconsider whether judges should be elected? and should there be term limits? So should we reconsider whether judges should be elected and should there be term limits? We're going to start with Ms. Sullivan.
Yes, I do not disagree with merit selection for judges. But given the system that we're in and the pragmatism of the arena that we're in, we elect judges here in Pennsylvania. So that's what we're faced with here. But I am not opposed to merit selection. And as far as term limits, I believe that retention is a good system, as it is a check on making sure that judges are ethical, straightforward, and doing the job that they need to do. But I don't necessarily agree with limiting a judge once they have all the experience and the judicial jurisprudence, and as long as they're being fair and equitable. I think giving the citizens the opportunity to retain or not retain them is an opportunity for them to say, we do not want you anymore because we don't think you're doing a good job. So I think that's a good mechanism in a system where we elect judges.
Thank you. Same question for Ms. Beck. Should we reconsider whether judges should be elected and should there be term limits?
I think there are excellent arguments on both sides of this question of election versus selection. I think the question of selection and non-election really depends on who does that selection. You know, if it was government appointments and a similar system to the federal model, I don't know that really solves anything. And the nice thing about the election process is that anyone can throw their hat in the ring. You know, someone like me who is a political outsider, I've never been politically involved or engaged with our elected officials in that way. You know, I would never come across the desk of a senator or a member of the House or Governor Wolf. So this is a nice, for me, it's nice that I can throw my hat in the ring and just work hard to win an election. And I think an elected process works well in the circumstance where, folks who are on this panel, who are watching this program, are becoming informed about the people that they are able to vote for. Ideally, they will, as Debbie said in the beginning, they will research the candidates, they will look into their backgrounds, and they will choose the one who is best suited for the court. And so, to the extent that can happen, and judicial elections take a more prominent place in the elected sphere, then yeah, I think that elections do work, and I would be in favor of them continuing. As far as term limits, I do not support that. When it comes to particularly the appellate courts, the institutional knowledge that comes with time on the bench is critical. It's really invaluable. You see these legal issues that come up in very nuanced ways, and it's really important that the people sitting there have a firm grasp on these issues. And the longer folks are on the court, and if they are willing to put in the time, the better these decisions can be.
Thank you. Judge Lane, same question.
Thank you. This is a question that's been going on since I worked in the Senate. People have been talking about this for a long time. And I agree. I think there are arguments to be made both ways, but just thinking about myself, I wasn't born privileged. My parents didn't go to college. My grandmother worked in the cafeteria. I was putting together boxes at the post office when I was in undergrad. Like I did not come from money or wealth, and I was not connected whatsoever. I grew up wanting to be a secretary because I think there's honor and dignity in it. And I was not exposed to lawyers, judges, doctors. I didn't know any of them. They didn't live in my neighborhood down the way in West Philadelphia. And I think that I look now at how I'm currently a judge on the Court of Common Pleas, and I don't know if that could have ever happened if it were not for elections, because someone like me could run and be elected by the voters and go to the Court of Common Pleas. And I'm really grateful for it. But I also understand the argument, the other side, people are talking about diversity. There's a lack of diversity in our courts. There's only one person of color on all the appellate courts here in Pennsylvania. And people make that argument that it could be more diverse. I don't know, but this is the system we're dealing with now. And I think that the voters will make a choice and the voters will speak. And as far as term limits, I think that there is work and value in being a judge and doing this job day in and day out and making decisions. I know when I got elected to the bench, I had colleagues who had been there, they had been retained multiple times and they had just such extensive knowledge. And I think that we cannot underestimate that. And being a judge, doing this day in and day out, that's not something that you can talk about. It's something that you learn on the job and you do. I can't explain it. It's so different than being a lawyer. It's so different than when I was a public school teacher. It's so different than anything I've ever done in life. So thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Neft, the same question.
I've listened to all the other candidates talk about this issue. And I'm not sure there's a lot I can add to that. But what I will say is that, there are pros and cons to each way of coming up with who's going to be the judge, whether it's being by election or whether it's by appointment. And to think that the politics leaves the process just because you take away the election process, it's not true. Politics plays a large role in the appointment process in the federal arena. And we've talked about in Pennsylvania for a long time the idea of merit selection for judges, but I don't think there's been a model that's come up that's actually been sufficient to deal with the issue. So, for example, the last thing that I saw in the General Assembly on the issue was that each caucus in the Senate and each caucus in the House might get a representative on a panel that decides the issue. But what's missing from that are the people that, first of all, do a lot of the work in the trenches, the bar associations, for example. You're also missing the diversity component, and diversity comprises a lot of things, whether it's gender, race, whether it's geographic, and those things have been kind of missing. And so I've not yet seen the model. And I'll just leave you with this, that, I've talked to my own state representative, Dan Miller, about this many times. And he said to me, I don't know that I could do a better job than the electorate to come up with a judge for any of the appellate courts. And he's got a point there. The electorate is smart, and they can sort of, parse through all of the candidates, determine who they like the best and who they think will be best qualified for the role. As to term limits, I'm against that. I think that, we do have the retention process here that allows the electorate to, say no if they want to after 10 years. And I think that, having term limits might in some way jeopardize the independence of the judiciary.
Thank you. So taking it back to the Superior Court for a second, I know some of our audience members are wondering, what are your specific connections or experiences with the Superior Court and how it operates? We want to hear a little bit more about, your specific experiences and connections. So I'm going to start with Ms. Beck.
Thank you very much. Well, as I've stated, I have practiced in every court under the Superior Court's jurisdiction. That's the criminal, civil, family, juvenile, and orphans court. I've tried over 1,400 cases that are, again, under the Superior Court's jurisdiction. I have practiced in the Superior Court itself. I have filed appeals. I have defended appeals. I've brought cases just to ensure that the rule of law is upheld in all the matters that I have tried. And then, of course, I spent 6 years on the other side of the Superior Court, drafting the very decisions that I will decide when elected to the Superior Court. I know that court inside and out from both sides of the bench, from all perspectives. I have a deep connection to that court. And in fact, I made the decision that I wanted to pursue a run for the Superior Court while working on the Supreme Court, because it was there that I really appreciated just how important the decisions of the Superior Court are. As I said, it is the court of last resort in about 98% of cases that come before it. Our Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which is the court above it, it only grants allowance of appeal in about 2, maybe 3% of cases that come from the Superior Court, because it is not equipped to handle the cases, every single case that comes before the Superior Court, nor is it the correct court to review all these cases. The Superior Court is the last stop for error correction. And I have deep familiarity with the process of deciding these cases, with the oral argument of these cases, with the practice of it within the Superior Court, and the runnings of a chambers. Thank you.
Thank you. Judge Lane, same question. Your connections and experiences with the Superior Court.
Thank you so much. As a judge on a court of common pleas, the trials that I hear, they go on appeal before the Superior Court. I've authored at least 200 opinions that have gone before the Superior Court. I've tried cases in those various areas at the Superior Court that they hear. Criminal matters. I was a public defender where I tried thousands of cases. I was in court day in and day out. I did family matters. I did civil. I've tried all those areas. And we know that 70% of the cases that go before the Superior Court, they're criminal. And I have extensive trial experience as a judge and an attorney in those areas. And I think, again, as you heard Ms. Beck just say, it is the last stop for most people in Pennsylvania. And we need to make sure that that last stop is done by someone who was a trial judge who did it day in and day out. You're reading this cold record. You're not hearing live testimony. You're not calling in various witnesses that happen on the trial court. Who best knows how the trial court works than someone who does it day in and day out as a judge? And it is not easy being a trial court judge. We are very thoughtful in our decisions. We run chambers, we manage staff, all the same things that you would do in a Superior Court. And those skills are transferable. And again, it is so important to have someone who has made those tough decisions. I told you, I hear human trafficking cases. I had a girl who ran away. She was 14 or 15 years old. And within 3 days, she was trafficked to so many men and forced to crawl and eat out of a dog bowl. You know, we are hearing serious cases that go up on appeal before the Superior Court. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neft, same question.
So let's start really quickly with just what the Superior Court handles. You've heard about criminal work, but they also hear just as much on the civil side in mostly private disputes. So you talk about your breach of contract case, you talk about a personal injury case, you talk about estate law or family law, real property law, and juvenile matters. Those are, you know, the crux of what the Superior Court handles. I was a clerk for a Superior Court judge for 4 years, and I drafted hundreds of decisions for my judge on all of those types of cases that go before the Superior Court. And in addition to the, you know, the large volume of work that you have to get through helping the judge write all these decisions, you have to help them on votes too, because the court sits in panels of 3, and sometimes they sit in panels of 9. And so you have to draft a decision so that you can, you know, garner the votes that support the decision that you're making, and so that not only the panel likes it and is happy with the result, but also so that the parties at the end of the day like the result. And in my private practice, I've worked very hard in civil litigation on many complex matters that can go before the Superior Court. You know, I too at one point worked for the Honorable Christine Donahue when she was in private practice, and I worked on one of the most complex cases you know, in the city of Pittsburgh involving the merger of Children's Hospital with UPMC when they were sued to stop that merger. And you've come up, when you develop a record in that case, it can be a huge record, and you have to be able to get through that record and get to the heart of the issues quickly. And my years of service in private practice allow me to do that, because I've created those records, and I know what a record has to look like when it goes up, and I know when it gets to the Superior Court what to look for in that record. So that's my experience level.
Thank you. Ms. Sullivan, same question.
Thank you. Yes, I'm uniquely also positioned with the Superior Court because as we were talking about the balance of cases in front of the Superior Court, my career almost mirrors what kind of cases the Superior Court takes. So it's about 60 to 70% criminal, 30 to 40% civil. And I have had the blessing of a career that has had both complex civil litigation and also the prosecution of criminal cases. So I am uniquely qualified because I am balanced. I have both. Now, on top of that, I spent 3 solid years just being in front of the Superior Court and being part of the appellate division in the Chester County DA's office. I've handled all types of criminal appeals, hundreds of briefs that I had to write, looking at the standards, parsing out the standards, advocating on behalf of the appellee, and also arguing in front of the Superior Court, being there for the bench when they had questions, and had to field those questions out of a record that had thousands and thousands of pages sometimes. So I'm uniquely qualified in that sense. But I also am qualified because I spent a lot of time in trial courtrooms, both on the civil side and the criminal side. I understand what goes on in a courtroom. I've tried every type of case you can have, from driving under the influence to child abuse cases to homicides, to complex civil litigation involving employment law and in 1983 civil rights cases. So I've had the gamut, and I know what goes on in a courtroom, and I know what the Superior Court looks for when you're making an argument as an advocate. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. As I'm sure you are all familiar with, a bill was recently introduced in our state legislature that proposes to have Pennsylvania appellate court judges elected by geographic districts rather than statewide. Future of the bill is uncertain, but it has generated quite the public debate, and one of our attendees has already asked about it. So general question, what are your thoughts on the bill? And we're going to start with Judge Lane.
Yeah, that question has come up a lot during our campaign, just when we're out on the trail meeting voters. And what we've done, because we know that things always wind up in court, if passed is always a possibility, is that we steered away from that. But what I want to note is that we've seen the importance of the courts. We've seen what's happened within the last year. We've seen the attacks, the constant attacks on democracy and on our courts, especially here in Pennsylvania. And we know that our courts have been that barrier. They have protected us and preserved democracy. And it is important that we keep our courts fair and impartial.
Thank you. Mr. Neft, same question.
It's interesting. When this first came up, I had a lot of thoughts about the House Bill 38, and I actually asked for permission from the state trial judges to be able to talk about this in some way, shape, or form, so that we could inform the public about what's going on. So I'll make a couple of comments. One, if you're going to elect judges from a regional basis, do the judges then represent the region, or do they represent the entire Commonwealth? That would be one question that you might want to ask. The other thing is, too, if you look at the result of what House Bill 38 might do, right now, you get to vote for 7 judges on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that runs statewide. You get to vote for 15 judges on the Pennsylvania Superior Court, and you get to vote for 9 judges on the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court. If this were changed based on House Bill 38, what's going to happen is you get to vote for one of these. So the Superior Court, for example, it hears cases in panels of 3. You would get to vote maybe for none of those judges that get to hear your case, even though they're deciding issues on a statewide basis. With the Commonwealth Court, very similar. You may have a case where you did not get to vote for the judges that may be handling your case in statewide issues. And on the Supreme Court, you will have gotten to vote for one, even though 6 other justices got elected by other people to determine issues that are of critical importance to the entire state. So, I leave it at that to you can parse through it and see where this goes. But right now, everybody gets to vote for everybody statewide for statewide issues and things that are of importance to the state.
Thank you. Ms. Sullivan, the same question.
Well, I'm hesitant to comment on it because of the judicial canons. It is a live bill. It has not gotten out of committee, and I am very familiar with it. But it could come before one of whoever's chosen as the final judge and elected. So I don't feel super comfortable talking about it because I wouldn't want to have to recuse myself if it were to come before me. I do agree that these are statewide courts. They require statewide perspectives. So I would leave it at that.
Thank you. Ms. Beck, same question.
Yeah, I will say I share Megan's hesitancy to respond. And in fact, as Judge Lane said, we've been asked this question repeatedly by voters in many of the meetings that we've been attending. And each time I answer just with some facts. And I think that there is a real question when, you know, the basis of the bill, as I understand it, is having a more geographically diverse court system in our appellate courts. And it has to do with smaller counties and more rural counties not being represented on the court. But if you look at the backgrounds of the judges and justices who do sit on that court, that rationale sort of falls away, because although, yes, many of them do live in Allegheny County and Philadelphia County, many of them are not actually from those areas, but are from other areas, more rural counties, you know, Justice Donahue being one, you know, from the Northeast, from Carbon County. I look also, and Brian's point is very well taken. You know, there is a question with respect to, you know, who are these judges representing? Judges don't have constituents. We don't have, you know, a single group that we are elected to pay attention to or to uphold certain canons for them. We uphold the canons of the law. You know, we ensure that the law is interpreted correctly and that the statutes are within the constitutional bounds. And so that is a real question. You know, the question is, as Brian was mentioning, also of vote dilution comes to mind. You know, these are statewide courts deciding statewide issues of law that apply to every single person in the state. The law applies equally in Allegheny County as it does in Philadelphia County, as it does in Adams County, as it does in Erie County. And so, you know, these are all things that need to be considered before voting on this. I see my time is up, so I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is a two-part question. Do you believe that judges exhibit implicit bias? And what will you do to ensure that your decisions, persons in your chambers do not exhibit implicit bias? And with that question, we're going to start with Mr. Neft.
So I think we all have implicit biases from our upbringing, from everything we've experienced in life, from everything we've seen around us. The key to dealing with implicit bias is, one, educating yourself on, you know, what to look for to make sure that you can put it in check. And when you're issuing a decision that's rendered on the law and on the facts of the case and not based on anything that comes in with regard to bias. So I think, you know, what could I do as a judge to counter implicit bias? One would be education for my staff. The other thing would be to put together a diverse staff of people from all walks of life, so that you know, you get the opinions from everybody and you get the benefit of everybody's life experience, which is a lot different than mine necessarily. And I'll be honest with you, as in my role in the Bar Association for Allegheny County, we have hit it out of the ballpark with implicit bias. We've created CLEs where we've asked, you know, where any judicial CLE is involved, we've put a implicit bias component in. When we go to our bench bar conference, we have implicit bias training for our judges, because it's important to make sure that our judges are well trained to deal with implicit bias. And I will tell you, I've sat on what's called our gender bias subcommittee in our Bar Association for many years, which fields complaints from individuals that believe they suffered from gender bias, whether it's implicit or whether it's explicit. And I've spent a lot of time speaking truth to power when that bias occurs. So, you know, it definitely exists. There are means to put it into check, and there are means to counter it by creating diversity within the judiciary and within the profession of law to make sure that it's minimized.
Thank you. Ms. Sullivan, do you believe that judges exhibit implicit bias, and what will you do to ensure that your decisions, and persons in your chambers do not? Sorry, Ms. Sullivan, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. So I believe in a justice system that shows respect, fairness, and applies the law objectively for everyone. I think in the appellate division, there is the advantage that we don't take live testimony. We are reading off of a record, hundreds and thousands of pages. Hopefully the advocates are kind enough to show us to the relevant portions of those trials. But so there's sort of a built-in advantage to that we're not looking live. But to follow up on Mr. Neft, I believe diversity of your staff is key, because that brings all perspectives to the table, and you can understand the issues through those diverse perspectives and come up with stronger opinions. But I believe in a system that is fair and just for everybody, and everybody should get their day in court and be able to argue, no matter what gender, no matter about what race, and no matter what their background is, poor or rich. That's what the judiciary is there for. We're the equalizers. So I think that the diversity is key, and also being like Lady Justice with the blindfold on.
Thank you. Ms. Beck, same question.
There's unquestionably implicit bias in our system. I mean, unfortunately, there's even some explicit bias, and we've seen examples of that with judges who leave the court in what I would consider absolute and abject shame for some of the things they say or do or email. But there is definitely implicit bias. You need only look at the division of who is involved in the child welfare system and in the criminal justice system and in the sentences that are handed down to know that there is unquestionably implicit bias. And certainly training is a wonderful route. I took it upon myself to do an implicit bias training about a year and a half ago, when I started sort of thinking about running for judge, when I was sort of contemplating this, because I think that anyone in the position of decision making should undergo this training, go through this training, and learn about when it may happen, how to confront it, and tools to combat it. I would absolutely advocate for all jurists, from magistrates to Supreme Court justices, having implicit bias training, and all members of their chambers. And certainly a diverse chambers is critical for a lot of reasons, not just for implicit bias, but also just to really deepen the decision to take it out of a monotoned decision making. But I would also, say, certainly, the Superior Court is part and parcel of somebody's day in court. And it is so important that the judges who are on those courts know the job, do the job right, make sure the record is thoroughly reviewed, make sure that no stone is unturned in the legal research, and that the writing is clear. When we see, for example, criminal sentences that are just disproportionate to the crime committed, or disproportionate to other sentences that were handed down in similar circumstances with similar defendants, that is something that the court needs to correct. And I think that is one way that implicit bias can be combated by the court. Thank you.
Thank you. And Judge Lane, same question.
Well, I'm gonna just concur with what was said here already. Obviously, we know it exists and it is problematic. We've heard Jill talk about the sentencings in criminal matters, look at family matters and how LGBTQ+ families can be impacted when it comes to custody and things of that nature. So we know it exists. But what I can say that as a judge in the first judicial district is that these are conversations that we're having all the time. We've had extensive training since I took the bench in 2013 to one that we just had a few weeks ago. This is something that is a real issue, and we in the courts are working hard to address. But I think that it also goes to diversity. I am a judge. My chambers have been very diverse since I was elected and took the bench. And I think that that is key and that's important, but also my friendship groups are diverse. You know what I mean? I get opinions and feedback from all of my colleagues, and we're all so different. I don't talk to people who just think like me. And I think that that is important as a judge to get these different perspectives. Look at RGB and Scalia. Look how different they were, but they still had conversations. They were collegial. They didn't agree, but they understood the thought process of the other. And I think that's just how it should be. You should talk to people and understand and appreciate our differences. But we definitely have to address implicit bias because unfortunately it has disproportionately affected marginalized communities, and we have to do better. We must do better. And we, and of course, are trying to do better. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next question is somewhat related. So what have you done so far to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in our legal community or our judicial system? And what would you do as a Superior Court judge? And with that question, we're going to start with Ms. Sullivan.
So as a person who is a female in the law, I have always mentored and helped women in the law from very diverse backgrounds, women of color, also, socioeconomically disadvantaged young women. So I think I will continue to mentor women, encouraging them to, get involved in the field of law, telling them as Judge Lane indicated, you grow up in a background like mine where you're from working class roots and nobody tells you you could be a lawyer someday or you could be a doctor someday. It's not encouraged because it's not thought of in your community. So I think it's reaching out to communities where young women like that are and mentoring them both through Big Brothers, Big Sisters, which I've done, and also, schools and different, I was on the Temple University trial team. We mentored a lot of kids by, judging all these different types of teams and encouraging them to move to the next level. So I think that mentoring process, that one-on-one communication, letting especially young women, that's been my experience. I would not limit it to any gender, but I think that is very, very important to let children know that they have a bright future regardless of their socioeconomic background, their gender, or their race.
Thank you. Ms. Beck, what have you done to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in our legal community or judicial system, and what would you do as a Superior Court judge?
Sure. So I currently serve as the Diversity and Inclusion Liaison for the Pennsylvania Bar Association's Appellate Advocacy Committee, and we have put on seminars and CLE and programs to help law firms and sole practitioners to understand the need for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I also sit on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee for the Allegheny County Bar Association. And similarly, we put on programs and educational pieces for the lawyers in the Bar Association. In the internship and externship programs I have been responsible for, I employed what I like to call a modified Rooney Rule. Anyone who I could identify as gender or racially or ethnically diverse, I would ensure that they would be interviewed and given the opportunity to come in to work in the whatever arena that I was in. Most recently was in the Supreme Court chambers. And I think that that is something I absolutely would continue in my hiring practices as a Superior Court judge. Taking a step back before I went to law school, I worked for an AmeriCorps program, and I worked with predominantly minority youth. These were kids on probation in the Maryland suburbs of Washington, D.C., and I did everything I could to expose them to worlds that were outside of their neighborhood, that was, outside of their day in and day out. And I think that that is something, there are programs that we can bring in to Pennsylvania, to the courts, that would really increase that sort of exposure for kids in Pennsylvania. And I think that letting them know, and we've heard this repeatedly, letting them know that the law is a field that is open to them, that the judiciary is an office that is open to them, would really do wonders for some of these younger generations.
Thank you. Judge Lane, same question.
Well, I just want to piggyback on what Jill said, because that's me. That's how I got here. I am one of those people who was from West Philly. I, again, was not born to a privileged situation, and they were looking for inner city youth. And that's how I got exposed to law and Judge Braxton through this program called American Foundation for Negro Affairs. And if it were not for that, being a lawyer, let alone a judge, would not have been on my radar. And that's why I think it is so important to mentor young people. As I do everything that I do as a public school teacher, I bring people up, I bring the students up. When I was at the public defender's office, I mentored young attorneys. When I went to work in the Pennsylvania Senate, I mentored women there as well. And no matter where I am in my life, I always bring someone with me. I don't go alone. I always bring people up. And I think that is so important, being a mentor to people, creating internships. But when we talk about these things, I don't go to the same place that people go. You have to look in different places to get different results. And that's what I do. And also I'm privileged with Judicial Council. That's where we're starting a program where we're really bringing in minority lawyers and trying to expose them to the professions of various professions in the law so they can think about something different. And also hopefully one day to be a judge, because we want our courts to be diverse. And we know that sometimes people need that extra touch, that extra time to really know. And I think that when we're looking at diversity, it can't be a word. It has to be a way of life and who we are. This is not something that we say because it's a nice catchphrase. No, that's who we are. And this is how I've lived my life. Thank you. I saw the card. I'm sorry, Deb.
Thank you. And Mr. Neft, same question.
So diversity, I mean, it's got a lot of complex factors of it. And I've been a leader in the Allegheny County Bar Association since around 2004. And getting diversity really requires change of culture. So on our Bar Association Board of Governors, if you went back to 2004, you would find that our Board of Governors was probably predominantly men, white men. And now in 2021, it's 75% women, probably 25% African American, and it really takes a village to do that introspection to make sure that diversity is promoted. We've had programs in the Bar Association which I have supported. So, for example, we have a program for Black, Indigenous, and people of color that it's a first-year program that gives kids that don't otherwise have an opportunity a head start to get a job in the profession of law in Pittsburgh. And they apply for these positions. They work for a law firm just as they would if they had gotten hired on their own and not through our Bar Association, but it gives them something to add to their resume to make them more competitive. And it's not just, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. It's also open to the LGBTQ community as well. So, I mean, we're really working hard in our Bar Association to increase diversity, and it requires presence. It means me being an individual who's white, making a difference for the African American community in our Bar Association and for the LGBTQ community in our Bar Association, listening to them and listening to their needs and making sure that we find results for them. And those are things that I've done. I agree with Jill that with regard to what could I do as a judge. The Rooney Rule is a great rule. It means it requires you to basically pick out people that have diversity and to interview them for a position, so that you make sure that those individuals that are getting the promotion they need and they're getting the visibility they need to be able to get jobs.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. As a judge, what would you do if the law required you to make a decision that was against your personal opinion or beliefs? And with that question, we're going to start with Ms. Beck.
Here we go. As difficult as it might be, you have to apply the law and answer the questions that are before you on the court. Certainly if the law is challenged in some way, on constitutional grounds or otherwise, certainly that would be a way to delve into it and to make the determination of whether that law should stand. But the Superior Court judge is not a super legislator. We do not rewrite the laws. We do not create laws that don't exist. but we do interpret those laws. We do, do very in-depth decisions as to their genesis and what they are intended to mean. And we do at times strike down laws. And so, but, if the law is before me, I might include in my written decision just some background information as to why the law is what the law is. But as a Superior Court judge, I am bound to apply the law and to answer the questions before me.
Thank you. Judge Lane, as a judge, what would you do if the law required you to make a decision that was against your personal opinion or beliefs?
I think that we go wrong when we try to change the law. Let's look at the fundamentals of the law, that everyone is created equally. If we go off of that premise, we're fine. But let's think about when it first started. I wouldn't be able to vote. I'm African-American, I'm a woman, things of that. But we see that the law, when applied, that everyone is treated equally. When we look at these constitutional protections and when they're applied, it works. We know that the Pennsylvania Constitution affords even more rights and protections than the US Constitution. And we need to think about those issues because the law is supposed to be applied fairly and equitably, no matter if you're rich, poor, black, white, who you love, if English is your first language or not, it does not matter. Everyone is entitled to the same justice, equal treatment, and to be treated with dignity and respect.
Thank you. Mr. Neff, same question.
So I think all judges are required to make hard decisions at times, and those decisions may not comport with our personal beliefs, but our personal beliefs don't have anything to do with what we're doing. Our job is really to be there on the Superior Court to correct errors that took place down below that may have affected the outcome of the case. But what we have to do is apply the rule of law as it's given to us. That doesn't mean that parties can't make constitutional challenges to unfair laws that we can look at and say that maybe that perhaps in this instance the law might provide otherwise. But just on a straight platform of what do we have to do? There's nothing but the rule of law. If the rule of law goes away, then we really don't have the legitimacy as a court to stand on to say that we can do whatever we want. That's just not a principle we can abide by.
Thank you. Ms. Sullivan, same question.
Yes, I would just like to piggyback on what Mr. Neff said. My feelings as a human being are not what are at issue before me as a judge of the appellate court. It is very important to show judicial restraint, to follow precedent as long as it is constitutional. And I would be definitely need to be held to that standard. It's very important to be slow to disturb precedent, no matter what my feeling was on the actual facts before me, and no matter what emotional chord it may strike. So, and the law needs to be applied objectively and fairly, whether I like the law or not personally. So I agree with Mr. Neft.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. So in the past year and even before, we've seen some very troubling incidents of where the safety of judges has been threatened or actually harmed. What do you want to see to make sure that judges remain safe? And with that question, we're going to start with Judge Lane.
I think that is a great question because unfortunately, we've seen a rise on attacks on judges and on my bench. And I know that personally, I've had death threats as well. And that is a serious issue. And I think that that's one that we're still working on in my court to make sure that we're all safe. I think that it is important that we understand that it is a judge's duty to uphold the law, to make these decisions and make sure that everyone gets a fair trial. And in doing so, I sit in criminal. Everyone is not going to be happy with the way something is resolved. And especially hearing these sexual assault cases. I've done cases with the Aryan Nation, a lot of hate crimes and things of that nature. And we need to make sure that when we're hearing these hard, difficult cases involving people being killed, people being maimed, people being blinded. I had a case where a gentleman's eyes were gouged out by the Aryan Nation and he was left an inch to his life. When we're hearing these kind of cases, and some people are not going to be happy with those results, and we have to make sure that we are protecting the judges who are doing this hard work, because we are doing it day in and day out. And oftentimes it is a very hard job. And if we could be safe in that, that would be great. And there are different ways that we've tried to work with different groups to make sure that judges' safety is ensured. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neft, same question.
So, yeah, safety is a humongous concern for judges and for the courts. In some respects, we're unique because we are public servants doing our job as a public servant. And I think we hold that to high esteem. But on the other hand, there are a lot of people that go to their jobs every day and suffer just the same insecurity that judges may. The person that works at a convenience store and gets robbed and then gets killed as a result of that, they're no different than we are. What I think is really important and what could really go a long way to sort of helping with regard to judicial security is education. So I think we have to get back a lot to civics in our elementary schools, so that our kids come to court and see exactly what it is that we're doing, whether it's an appellate court, whether it's a trial court. They need to understand the exact role in the court system. I was really fortunate when I was a kid. My grandfather knew a judge, Judge Louis Bavero in Pittsburgh. And when I met him for the first time, he invited my whole classroom to come down to see him. And I couldn't even tell you today what that case was all about that he had. But it really left an impact on me to see how he tried to, talk to, the party that was there. I don't remember if it was a criminal case where it was a defendant or whether it was a domestic situation, but he really tried to work with that individual to try to better his life. And it left a real impact for me about the really good work that judges do. And I think it's really important that we, take that one step further and get kids into the courtroom so that they see what it's like. And we need to do that really in a broad-based manner so that we educate them about exactly what civics is about and what the court is about.
Thank you. Ms. Sullivan, same question.
I think it's a matter of security. I think that there definitely needs to be security on their staff. That is, IT people, making sure that their home addresses and where they live and what they do in the community is locked down, that there are no patterns that those judges follow where they can be followed, and reaching out to the local law enforcement in every community so that they know they have a judge there, and that judge has the ability to reach out if they're not feeling secure or they feel like someone's stalking them or outside of their house. I mean, it's communication, and it's everything that we've seen, unfortunately, with the judges being harmed is that information that the general public shouldn't have, they had. And I think that's a matter of security with both law enforcement and their staffs, the judicial staffs, and the people who work on the computer systems with those staffs.
Thank you. Ms. Beck?
So I know the security that works for both the Supreme Court and the Superior Court, and they really are excellent. I mean, they take their jobs extremely seriously, and they're very good at what they do. But look, this is a very public role. We're in a very public forum right now, running for elected office. It is just a very public thing. We are running to be as part of the judicial branch of government. So really, I think, the best thing we can do for safety is to, again, I think what Bryan said, educating the public. And I think that really comes through transparency on the court. Letting people know exactly how decisions are made, exactly how this happens, writing clear and concise decisions that people can understand. No, people are not always going to be happy with the decision. Somebody is going to lose the appeal. But if the judges write it in such a way, the decision in such a way that everybody can understand it, at least they won't be surprised, which could reduce some of the threat concerns that arise. But truly, the security that works for the courts now, I know they do an excellent job and they're very hardworking. And I think that goes a long way just to give some people peace of mind.
Thank you. So this might be our last question because we're going to close out by 7:30. So the question is, during the last election, we saw a huge turnout with respect to Generation Z voters. And the question for the candidates is, could you explain to those Gen Z voters why they specifically should be very interested in who sits on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court? I'm sorry, the Pennsylvania Superior Court. And with that question, we're going to start with Ms. Sullivan.
That's an excellent question. I think that we have to explain both in social media formats. I have 2 children that are teenagers, and it seems like they have, 30 different apps to get their information. So I think it's very important that we do it in a relevant way for young people to show them how the courts affect their lives, the appellate courts, the trial courts, and that voting is such a precious right. We need to incorporate that with showing them how important it is to vote for judges and how judges impact them directly. But just the right to vote it's such an important part of our process. And we need to get that word out. And the way to get that word out isn't like the way we used to in our generation. So it's social media oriented, maybe, being available. I mean, forums like this, the PMC, being able to click on a link and watch this forum, having the means to do that, to explain to kids who are voting and why it's important to them, because that ultimately will get them out. So I think it's a combination of those things, but also programs that make us real people and not just candidates. That resonates with young children and teenagers. So I think that all of those things combined is what I would say to people who are trying to explain to Gen Z like us how important it is to get out the vote.
Thank you. Ms. Beck.
I said this in my opening introduction. These cases, these courts, who is sitting in these seats, it matters. It matters to everyone. The Superior Court is interpreting our laws and our Constitution. Those apply to you, to me, to millennials, to Gen Z, to everybody. And they need to care, because if they want to see a change in our system, if they see a shortcoming or something that is lacking in our judiciary, there is one very surefire way to change that. And that is to get people in office that you think will do the job that you want them to do. I take this very seriously. I have many young people as interns and paid staff on my campaign. We have an idea of one of my Gen Z folks who's helping me out was to do a Youth for Beck. And these college students and 20 somethings are posting on this page things that matter to them. We have a very engaged group of young people in Pennsylvania. They just need to know how to help and where to go and how to effectuate the change they want to see. Everybody should care who is sitting in these seats. There's no question that matters. Whether you were in favor of the decisions by our Supreme Court concerning the Donald Trump cases or not, whether you were in favor of the decision concerning the congressional gerrymandering, whether or not you agreed with those, there's no question that who is sitting in those seats matter. Elections have consequences. And from my point of view, the sooner that we can identify to these young adults that, you need to have a voice in this, you need to have a say in this. And how do you do that? You show up and vote, and you show up informed. I think the better off we'll be, because, there, as you said early on, there are no term limits for judges. There are retention elections. We are going to have people in these seats for a very long time. And so they should really care who they are electing to these seats. Thank you.
Thank you. Judge Lane.
I think that this generation is on fire. I have a 20-year-old daughter, and they are really on fire and engaged. As former co-chair of the Advancing Civics Education with the Philadelphia Bar Association, judges and lawyers, we're in these schools teaching civics. We're having these real honest discussions with these students, and they want to be the change they want to see. And now they have the tools to do it. We've seen this generation take to the street and demand change. We know that they are hungry for it. And they're not just talking, they're doing. They're running for election themselves, and they're winning. They are engaged and they understand. And the more we keep talking about it, for those that don't know, they are finding out very quickly that judges have serious powers. They can take your liberty, your life, your family can be altered, and your money, you know, your housing. These are real things that are important, and they want to have a voice. And we've seen them speaking up and speaking out, and it is a beautiful thing. And we have to engage them. We can't talk down to them like we know more. My daughter teaches me stuff all the time, and we have to make sure that we're open to ideas no matter where they come from someone who's 95, but also someone that's 20. We all can share and offer things together. And this generation is really inspiring me to keep going and to keep this fight alive. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And Mr. Neft.
You know, one of the most fun things that I get to do as a practitioner is when I get to go out to a high school and speak to a group of high school students. We have a program called Stepping Out, where we talk to them about issues they may face once they've graduated from high school or from college, about the issues that they may face. And really, you know, educating, you know, the young individuals in our society about just how the court might affect their life is a great step into getting them to understand the importance of the courts. And invariably, a lot of the discussion when you talk to a group of high school students, it talks about, they want to know, well, how do I avoid this, you know, getting a traffic ticket, or how do I avoid this? But it leads into discussions where we talk about their Fifth Amendment rights. I mean, it's the one right everybody pretty much knows you have the right to remain silent, and it goes on from there. But how do you teach somebody, you know, what that means and what that means to them if they're ever confronted with a situation where they may need to invoke that right? And that's, you know, that's one of the best things we can do, because the Superior Court, at the end of the day, very much when it comes to criminal law, they're interpreting the Fifth Amendment, and they're interpreting the Fourth Amendment, and they decide, you know, when police can go into your home and when they can't. And those are, you know, those are critical issues for the average, you know, citizen at any given point of the day. You know, we deal with contract issues. What does it mean to have a contract? Can I get out of the contract at the end of the day? And, you know, you kind of tell them, well, you know, contracts are meant to be enforced, not to not be enforced, but there are, you know, means where you might get out of it. But educating our young community on just how important this is and putting it into everyday situations is a great step into teaching them the importance of the Superior Court.
Thank you. So that's it for all of our questions. I want to thank the candidates for their participation in answering some very easy questions. But in all seriousness, thank you for your very thorough, honest, thoughtful answers. I think you really did give our audience a chance to get to know you. You know, your record, your credentials, and most importantly, your values. So thank you for your answers. And lastly, I want to turn it over to Debbie Gross to close us out.
Okay, so boy, this is impressive. 7:29. Wow. So everyone, I want to thank all the candidates. Marcel, I want to thank you so much for moderating. Carnegie Library, thank you for hosting. Thank you to the co-sponsors, and, you know, best wishes. Remember, please go out and vote. Please register to vote if you haven't registered, May 3rd. And stay tuned for April 19th, the Commonwealth Court Candidate Forum. Thank you all. Have a good night.